Hey there, welcome back to the Impact Driven Leader podcast. This is your host, Tyler Dickerhoof. If you're tuning in for the first time, man, I'm excited to share with you today. Glad you're here. If you are a longtime listener, excited for you as well. One thing that I'm going to ask of you, could you do me a favor? Could you be a show reviewer? If you can do that, if you could help me be a show reviewer, I would love if you were to review this episode. Give me a rating. Let me know. Share your thoughts. This is one thing I'm going to start doing every month. Once a month, I am going to, for whoever shares an episode or reviews, I'm going to draw and you're going to get a copy of the book of the month. This month, in the month of April, we are reading, as you can see the book right behind me, John Maxwell's 16 Undeniable Laws of Communication. If you missed the previous episode with Mark Cole where I introduced that book, make sure you go back, listen to that. I'm excited for anyone that shares. Again, here this month, you will get a copy of the book of the month, as well maybe another special treat. So there will be a drawing for each one of those. If you share, if you review, I'll draw from that and give you a special shout out. So thanks for tuning in. As well, you can also watch this on YouTube. Maybe you are. See a little bit extra, see some body language, see myself and the guest. Today, it's just me. You know, every once in a while, every month or two, a couple months, I do a special episode where it's either share an idea, share a book. In this, I want to share an idea. I have an upcoming event coming the 8th and 9th of May. It's called the Impact Driven Workshop. It's really focusing for those HR, those VP, those upper management executives who are like, oh my goodness, how do I deal with this? We have broken trust. We have low morale. We have communication issues because of everything that's going on. If that's you, I want to invite you to the Impact Driven Workshop. That is on May 8th and 9th from 12 to 2 Pacific time. You can go sign up for that. Go to impactdrivenworkshop.com. You can also find that in the show notes. All right, let's get on with it. Today's topic, sharpening the knife. All right, let me give you a little background here. I grew up on a farm, as you guys may well and understand. And one thing I always had in my pocket was a pocket knife. I don't know a day that I didn't have a knife. Actually, I do know a day. And if I didn't have a knife in my pocket, it was a bad day. Why? Because I needed a knife to cut bales. I needed a knife to just do the work that I had to do. Well, one of the things that would often happen is that knife would get dull. And I wasn't very good about sharpening it. It was always difficult. And whenever it got dull, it just made the job harder or worse. And sometimes then you would go find a different implementing tool. I learned this much later in my life, that you can actually use a string to cut another string by friction. I wish I would have learned that when I was like 10 or 11. It would have saved me a lot of days of trying to break bales, trying to do those things without the tool, without a knife. Well, here's another thing that I also want to discuss. Maybe you've heard me share this before. Maybe it's something new to you. If it's new to you today, that's great. I think you'll learn from this. It's kind of the phrase of be the sharpest knife in the kitchen. And we're getting to this, right? We're getting to this topic of sharpening the knife and this idea of be the sharpest knife in the kitchen. Well, why? I learned this from my mentor, John Maxwell. He shared one time in a book just kind of how disheveled he can get sometimes, how I would call him a Mr. Magoo. He owns that as well. And when I listened to that, it gave me validity to say, hey, your value is not in what you know. It's not trying to be valuable to everyone because you know a little bit about everything. Your value is when you're really, really, really like special at one thing. And I took this lesson away from that. And it's this. I would rather be the sharpest knife in the kitchen. Shout out to my friend John Rulin, who always provides sharp knives for the kitchen, his Cutco knives. But I would rather be the sharpest knife in the kitchen rather than all the utensils in the drawer. Well, let me go with this a little bit farther. You know, like John shares with me his knives, which been a gift of those. If you've gotten those knives, you know they are very sharp. Watch out. But you always, when you need to cut something in the kitchen and you need that special sharp knife, you know where to go. It is that one knife that's always sharp that you know it's always going to get the job done. You go there, you don't even think about it. Now, imagine you go and you're going to eat, I like yogurt. All right, so you're going to have some yogurt. So you take out your container of yogurt, you go to the drawer with the utensils. You know, you got your knives, you got your forks, you got your spoons, you got your other size spoons, you got your other size forks. You have all your serving utensils. Now, do you look for this special spoon? Oh, you know you don't pick a fork, right? You don't pick a knife. But then you look at the allotment of spoons. Which spoon do you pick? If you're like me, I pick the spoon on top. It's not a special spoon. I remember, this is going way back. This is a good story. Somebody's going to enjoy this story. Somebody is going to go back into the 1980s and relive this memory. I remember, as I shared that, totally off the cuff, as I'm sharing this, you're going to love this little interlude. If anyone has one of these spoons or sees one of these spoons, please send me a link, DM Tyler_Dickerhoof at Instagram, because I would love to go get one, just as a bit of nostalgia. Kind of like this gumball machine I have behind me. I'll tell that story another day. But there was this special spoon, and it was a Tony the Tiger spoon. Now, my family, we didn't have a lot of Frosted Flakes, but I remember there was this special spoon that you could get, and it had the emblem, the Kellogg's emblem on the end of it. And I can remember just sending away for that special spoon. So that was the special spoon. Now, going back to my yogurt and picking the spoon out of the drawer, you just pick whatever spoon. And here's where I'm going to lead that into us today. The great opportunity in leadership is to be that knife. Now, sometimes we need to sharpen that knife. See, when we're just a utensil in the drawer, we don't know our special use. Now, my Tony the Tiger spoon, that was a different story, right? But if you're just a knife, if you're just a fork, if you're just a spoon in the, like a butter knife, like a, typical, at your place setting knife, not a special knife, not a Cutco knife, not a knife that you're going to use to cut the turkey on Thanksgiving. It's not the knife that you're going to use to cut the prime rib. It's just a knife, right? But as leaders, we have the opportunity to be that special knife. We get to do things that other leaders, other people don't get to do. And that's where I want to lead us into today, this topic, this discussion of sharpening the knife. Now, as a leader, what do I describe sharpening a knife? Well, there's 3 questions here. And what I'm going to answer is this 3 questions that circle around the idea of sharpening the knife as a leader. And the first question, a statement, really, but a question, is how to build self-awareness to create more trust. See, sharpening the knife as a leader is building self-awareness. The next one is how to improve communication. If you're reading along this month with the book club, where we're reading the 16 undeniable laws of communication, you're getting a lot of this information. Well, this touches a little bit about that, but it's how to improve communication so everyone feels heard. See, as a leader, if we don't sharpen our knife, we're like that pocket knife I had when I was younger. It's not working. I got to go find another tool. When you aren't being heard, you're not a sharp knife. And then the last one, how to empower your team and reach new heights. See, sharpening the knife as a leader is not cutting more things. It's honing that knife. It kind of goes back to that classic Abraham Lincoln comment. Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree. I'm going to take 5 to sharpen the axe. So you're more effective when you get there. Now, let me break this down a little bit. Let me go back to the first one. How to build self-awareness to create more trust. See, as a leader, as we sharpen our knife, we must become more aware. We part of grinding away at the dull edge is understanding what we really are. Because when we think we're aware, when we think we're sharp, and we're really not. And what tests us? The first time you go try to cut a tomato, and you're trying to cut that tomato, and it doesn't go through. That knife's not sharp. See, when we think we're aware, we're really not. I had this opportunity in one of the recent impact-driven leader roundtables, and we got into this discussion of sitting at a meeting. And part of what we're walking through in the impact-driven leader, one of the sections, is recognizing toxic beliefs and mindsets. And as we discussed this topic, we got down the pathway of sometimes it's really hard to reset the mindsets that we know aren't beneficial for people. And I made the kind of connection to coaching athletes. So my kids are athletes. I've coached two of them, hopefully soon coach the third, but I've coached two of them. And sometimes even as a parent, well, I'm going to step back, and it's not about coaching them, but it's as a parent. And as a parent, you encourage them to do a lot of things. Like try new things, right? Don't worry about mistakes. And then they go make a mistake and you're like, oh, did they do it again? If you're not on video, if you're not watching the video, I just clasp it's just like, oh, just imagine, oh man, they did it again. See, that body language without the words tells everything. Now, let's take, for example, this. I'm building my self-awareness to create more trust. What if that moment happened? Say you're in a workplace, you're in a meeting, and somebody asks a question, you're just like, oh, okay. And you roll your eyes a little bit. Now, say for a moment you did this. Say, ooh, I caught myself. I just rolled my eyes. Hey, Mary, man, that was inappropriate of me. I am so sorry. I'm working on that. I'm working on realizing that I need to not make snap judgments. You know what? Can you help me work on this? I am sorry for coming across that way. Now, as I shared that within our roundtable, one member quickly shared this. You know what, Tyler? He goes, when you do that, when we ask for grace in those moments, it also invites accountability. See, to build awareness, self-awareness, in order to create more trust, there has to be accountability. And if you're a leader, you can't be autonomous, right? You really can't be. You have to be responsible to everyone. But if you haven't created a platform for accountability, well then, how are you ever going to get sharper as a knife unless you're willing to be honed? See, being honed is the process of taking a knife and rubbing it on a rough surface, right? You take a knife and you rub it at the right angle on the proper surface, and it's going to wear away the steel that you don't want there. See, when we invite people into our growth, hey, I'm working on this. Please, I encourage you to help me. That is not the response I wanted. Or, one member shared, oh, this is things that I do. Like my wife would say, I'm a chopper. Sometimes when I talk and get very intense and I chop. And it's making me aware. Oh, that's not conveying what I want to convey. That self-awareness, actually, I'm going to say, hey, I encourage you to hold me accountable here. What's that do? It lets people know that you're not above them. You're not above reproach. And that builds trust. See, another factor here is something I shared a couple months ago. I invite you to go back and listen to that episode where I talked about the window in the mirror. I'm going to quickly interject it here. Make sure it's in the show notes where you can go back and listen to that episode. But too often, our intentions are what we see in the mirror. We look in the mirror, people say, hey, hold a mirror up. What do you see? It's like, oh, I see my intentions. Okay, I meant to do right. But the window, the piece of glass that separates you from everyone else, shows something much different. It shows your actions. See, it doesn't reflect. It doesn't change. It doesn't create an image that we're used to seeing. It's our real. See, in order to become a sharper knife and build trust, create more self-awareness, we got to spend a lot more time in front of the window and not the mirror. Let's move on to point number 2 in sharpening the knife, and that's improving your communication so everyone feels heard. There's a piece, an element in the book, 16 Undeniable Laws of Communication. You're going to hear about it a couple times this episode. It's a great book. Where John describes this situation. Too often speakers just are in a hurry to get their content out. They're going to speak at people. They're going to tell them all the things that they know. Yeah, it's one of those interesting attributes when I look back and think about my own evolution as a communicator. I'm working on it. That's what I'm doing here, is wanting to speak with people, not at people. See, there was a point in my life where my insecurity overwhelmed me so much that I was just trying to prove the value that I had. So I would speak at people. And that wasn't very much fun. And I learned through my mentors, I learned through other people, it's a whole lot more fun to just have a conversation. That's what I do with the podcast. I love to have a conversation with people. Like, be curious. Ask questions that are like, oh, okay, tell me more. See, I believe this: when a leader speaks with people, they're inviting them into that conversation. When they speak at people, people walk away thinking, oh, I'm not worthy. Oh, I have nothing to add. Oh, they don't really need me. And as a leader trying to sharpen your knife, in other words, improve your communication so everyone feels heard, you need to make sure that they're willing to sit at the table and have the conversation with you. As if not, then you're on a journey all by yourself. See, part of this as well, improving your communication so people get heard, is being agenda focused. Not agenda focused, being progress focused. Let me restate that. Instead of being agenda focused, be progress focused. You're going to hear this in a couple weeks. I posed it to one of our future guests. I'm going to share it again here. Would you rather meet a deadline and lose your entire team, but you met the deadline? You may have to replace half your team, but you met the deadline. That's one option. Or would you rather have your team and stand the chance to miss the timeline? You know, as I posed that to several people. And it's an absolute, but yet it's not absolute. And this is what I believe. When you become agenda focused, or you are agenda focused, the people no longer matter. But when you're progress focused, the people all matter. Their development, their growth, they're making sure they're moving down the right path. They're collectively going the right direction. Well, the only way to do that is to communicate in a way that everyone feels heard. Because if you're speaking to people and they're below you, you're speaking in a way that they don't feel like they belong, then you're going to hit that deadline and no one's going to be there with you. The reality is you probably won't hit that deadline. And the other reality is if your entire team's with you, there's a great chance you're going to hit the deadline, timeline, or even surpass it. See, part of what I mentioned earlier when we talked about the window and the mirror and, being aware, not aware, when I share about, the facial expressions, that's really saying what we're not saying. Part of improving our communication so people feel heard is not reacting in a frustration to what they say, but rather a fascination. Oh, with curiosity, tell me more. Why does it appear that way to you? Why do you feel that way? What made you ask that question? Oh, what experience do you have that led you to that conclusion? See, that fascination, that curiosity changes communication instead of being one way to two ways. When it's a two-way communication, it's actually a conversation. But when it's one way, you don't need anyone else. You're talking to dead air. The third point in regard to sharpening your knife is this. It's how to empower your team to reach new heights. African proverb, probably familiar with it. One goes fast, many go far. The only way for you to accomplish more is not by you working harder, knowing more, being going faster. It's by helping those around you accomplish more. It's being the sharpest knife in the kitchen and allow someone else to be the special spoon. Because it's only then can each of you meet your potential. I learned this rule. It's from, I believe, one of my mentors, Craig Rochelle, I believe. And he shared this. It's the 80% rule. If someone can do a task or job 80% as well as you, they need to be doing it. Because they'll never get to 100% if you're waiting for them to be at 100%. And at the same point, if you're waiting for someone else to be at 100% for you to pass it off, well, you're going to be stuck with it a long time. The only way for people to go from 80 to 100 is through guidance, repetition, and mentorship. The only way for you to help someone go from 80% to 100 is through you allowing them. I've also heard it this way. 10, 80, 10. Meaning I offer 10% to start. The other person does the 80%. I do the 10% to finish. It's what John Maxwell calls putting the cherry on top. I start the idea. You take and run with it and make it better than I could ever make it. And then I just put the little cherry on top. It's a team effort. Here's the other lesson that I had in regard to empowering your team and reaching new heights. This happened when I was 18, 19 years old. I had a summer internship. It was in between trips. I believe it was after I studied abroad in New Zealand and before I went back to college. And I worked at a local farm. I worked at a farm that kind of knew the individuals. My parents had known them. I'd worked there a little bit before during a break. In that summer day, I remember Carl. He was one of the owners. And I show up for work. It's early. We do our normal chores, again, dairy farm. And after that, he said, Tyler, I'm working for you. No, just a little time out here. I was at that point maybe 19. Carl was roughly my dad's age. So he's somewhere in his late 40s, early 50s. He's the owner of the farm. Pretty large operation. And he tells me, I'm working for you today. It's like, oh, okay. And he had given me a project. He allowed me to control this project. I had no financial stake in it other than I was doing the job. And he taught me an amazing lesson that day. You're never too big to work for someone else on your team. It's a lesson I talk about now 20 some years later. And I'm thankful Carl taught me that day. You're never too big. Here's what I left that day with. Man, I felt empowered. I felt fulfilled. I felt like I mattered, that Carl would allow me to be the project lead at 19. And he would work for me. However, I needed assistance. He was there to help me, to guide me. It's a lesson, again, that I share with you because it's impacted me. And I ask you this. When was the last time you asked someone else, maybe 20 years, maybe extremely less experienced to you, say, hey, I work for you today. How can I help you? What can we do here? The other part to empowering your team and reaching new heights is allowing others to do what only they can do. The facet of sharpening a knife is everyone's a different knife. Some people are carving knives. Some people are paring knives. Some people are butter knives. Some people are serrated knives. You can continue on that. But yet, when we become such a specialized knife and realize that every one of us are a unique knife with a unique purpose, we realize there's a special job for every single person. Now, it could be like some people in my family that they use a serrated knife for every single thing. Oh, it doesn't matter what it is. Want to cut open a new box? Oh, go grab the 12-inch serrated knife. It happens. See, you can try to do that, but then you understand, some knives have an absolute best fit. And you know when they're most fulfilled is when they do what only they can do. Where you reach into that drawer and you say, today's a special day because you're the knife for me today. Sharpening the knife as a leader is learning and building self-awareness to create more trust. It's improving your communication so everyone feels heard, and it's empowering your team to reach new heights. Learning to sharpen the knife too. The process of sharpening the knife as a leader will never get old. You can absolutely see knives that have been whittled away and whittled away and whittled away. The sharper they are, the more useful they are. I encourage you to sharpen your knife. Thanks for being here. Again, as always, man, I'd love for you to leave a review. I'd love for you to give a rating, or even better, if you got value from today's episode, share it with someone. Maybe sit down, listen to it, go over it with your team saying, hey, where are we hitting the mark here? Asking from a self-awareness, where am I missing? Say, I'm working on this. Help me work on this. And lastly, I want to invite you to the impact-driven workshop. Again, it's for VPs, executive, HR directors, upper management who are left in this point right now to say, how do we do this? How do we lead effectively with everything coming at us? I want to help you sharpen your knife. Go to impactdrivenworkshop.com. It'll be in the show notes as well. Until next time, thanks for being here. Thanks for being a part of the audience. Have a good one.